Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. This is the 109th episode of Your Tax-Free Life. I'm excited to be here with all of you. I'm hoping that all of you are doing well and that your families are doing well today. The name for this episode this week is Your Retirement Plan at DEFCON 1 Status? Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about DEFCON 1 and what does that have to do with your retirement plan and also your retirement readiness from a business standpoint. But for those of you that may not know this, the DEFCON system is a system that has been used and is being used by the U.S. military and many of the allies throughout the world. So there are 5 levels of DEFCON. You have DEFCON 1 through DEFCON 5. DEFCON 5 is primarily minimal defense. This is just normal way of providing security for the United States. DEFCON 1, on the other hand, is ready to go to nuclear war. Obviously, the highest level for the U.S. military has been DEFCON 2. And by the way, that was during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. So you may wonder, well, Bert, we know we have DEFCON 1 through 5. Now 2, 3, and 4 pretty much tells you a little bit of the difference between readiness and, how quickly can we get our country ready for war and so forth. But DEFCON 5 is obviously basic readiness alert. And then DEFCON 1 is when we're ready to pull the trigger and go to nuclear war. Now, what does the DEFCON system have to do with your retirement plan? Well, I would argue a lot. There's a lot of stuff that I'm going to be discussing with you today on this podcast that are going to hopefully make you think a little bit about whether your retirement plan is either a DEFCON 5, DEFCON 4, 3, 2, or if you're in really bad shape, then you may very, very well be at DEFCON 1. So what does it really mean from a retirement standpoint? Well, it means a level of retirement preparedness in your financial life. So for instance, if you have adequate retirement assets, if you have some guaranteed income coming into you once you're retired, if you have a lower standard of living, you're not a big spender, and you have protected yourself from the fatal 4 of retirement, the risk of dying too soon, living too long, living with a disability, and last but not least, living with eroding factors, then your retirement plan may very well be a DEFCON 5. Now, obviously, there are always things that you can do to improve it. But from a financial standpoint, you're probably okay, and you're going to be in a fairly good position when it comes to the future in your retirement life. Now, on the other hand, if you have inadequate retirement assets, you have no guaranteed income other than perhaps your Social Security benefits. If you do have a lot of tax inefficiencies, and the propensity for high stock market volatility index is there in your retirement accounts because most of the money that you have in retirement happens to be in the stock market at the time. And you also have a propensity to interest rate volatility because of how your assets are divided from an asset allocation standpoint. And you have no protection whatsoever from the fatal 4. Then you may actually be at DEFCON 1, whereby financial failure is imminent and or guaranteed. So you have to really go back and do an audit on all your retirement assets and see where you're at from a positioning standpoint when it comes to either DEFCON 1, which is pretty much Armageddon from a business perspective, or DEFCON 5, which you're pretty good okay. Now, I think the question is, well, how do you increase your DEFCON retirement plan preparedness to eventually get up to a DEFCON 5 where all you have to do is just monitor your assets and everything else is going to be pretty much taken care of itself from that point of view? Well, there are a number of things that you can do. Now, obviously, the more time you have in preparation for retirement, the better off you're going to be. So if you have anywhere between 5 to 10 years in retirement, some of you may have even more, but the vast majority of the clients that I engage are clients that are within 10 years of retirement, and some are actually in retirement when they come to see me for the first time. You may want to immediately start saving 15 to 20% of your income into preferred retirement accounts. And the reason why I say 15 to 20% is that when you look at all the eroding factors, are about a 3% for each eroding factor. So the 5 major eroding factors will give you approximately 15% in lower rates of return. So you need to be able to offset that by putting more and more money into your retirement accounts. If you're going to factor every other eroding factor, then it'll get up to 20%. So if you're able to fund your retirement account, now the sooner you start doing this, the better off you're going to be. Anywhere between 15 to 20% of contributions, you should be okay from that point of view. Also remember that savings is nothing more, nothing less than delayed expenditures. So you're saving money while you're working, you're putting money away into your qualified plans in order to save for retirement. And the only reason why you're doing that is that at some point in time in the future, when you stop working, now instead of you having to work for your money, now hopefully your money's going to work for you. Now, the other thing that you can do is, you got to take a look at your preferred retirement accounts. And, what are they? Well, there are a number of preferred retirement accounts that I like using with the vast majority of my clients. And those would include the Roth 401ks, the Roth IRAs, 7702 plans, which are the cash value life insurance plans. And then obviously, don't forget to provide and make optimum, and the key word here is optimum, contributions to your traditional 401ks and IRAs. And if you're someone that enjoys investing in real estate, like real estate investment properties for income purposes, then that would also be a win-win for you, your family, and your business from that perspective. Now, you also need to diversify your retirement income by creating real estate cash flow, and that's something very important. My daughters are 28 and 31, respectively. And they're already starting to invest in real estate. And that's something that I want them to do on a consistent basis, because at the end of the day, if you can diversify that income risk by generating cash flow in retirement, because when it comes to retirement, it's all about cash flow. It's no longer about accumulating assets and so forth. It's all about the assets that you already have and what kind of rate of return or what kind of a distribution rate can you get from a cash flow perspective. Now, you also, if you're looking at cash flow and you look at taxation and where taxes are going to be in the future, then you may also want to consider to diversify your retirement cash flow between ordinary income, and that would come from investing in your traditional 401ks, IRAs, TSPs, SEPs, 403bs, etc., where the income and the cash flow that you're going to generate from those accounts will pay ordinary income tax. But you also may want to diversify in capital gains, where you may have properties that you may want to sell at some point in time in the future and generate a capital gain cash flow. Or if you have stocks that you can hold on for more than a year, and then you can start selling those stocks, and then obviously you're going to be able to create a capital gain distribution at that point in time. Always consider that if you own real estate property and you own the properties for income purposes, the income that you generate would be taxed at ordinary income rates. But the good thing about real estate is that there are so many ways that you can reduce that income by taking IRS deductions that are adequate and that are apropos from a deduction and exemption and credit standpoint. Now, you also want to create a guaranteed paycheck program. And this is probably the most important of them all. So you have to be able to create a guaranteed income and a guaranteed paycheck program in which I would argue 65% to 85% of your monthly cash flow is guaranteed for life. Now, if you're asked the question, what percentage of your income would you like to have guaranteed in retirement? Most of you are going to say 100%. I know I would. But let's say that you can't get to 100%. If you can get to 65 to 85%, then I think you're going to be pretty close to having a successful retirement life, because even if the other assets that you have set aside for retirement, whether it's real estate, properties, and so forth, is not totally guaranteed because of certain volatilities, the fact that you have between 65 and 85% of your income in guaranteed cash flow, then that's going to give you a lot more leverage and a lot more opportunities to do a number of different things with your retirement assets that you could not do otherwise. Now, you also want to use immediate, fixed, and index annuities to create guaranteed paychecks while reducing your volatility eroding factors. So there are different ways that you can do it. So if you have $1 million portfolio of retirement assets and you're 60 years of age, 60% of that portfolio, or $600,000, should be invested in guaranteed cash flow and guaranteed annuities. Now, that $600,000 does not have to be all in one annuity. This is where you're going to set up an annuity portfolio for yourself and your family, where the income that you're going to be generating, you can never outlive. Because there's a very high probability that unless you do so, you're going to have a higher propensity to run out of money before you run out of life when it comes to retirement. Now, immediate annuities are going to provide you with guaranteed cash flow immediately, usually within 30 days. Now, you can have an immediate annuity that will start guaranteed income, let's say 9 months or a year from now, but most immediate annuities are going to start their income distribution right away. You can also use fixed annuities as a deferred strategy. So let's say that you have $100,000 in that portfolio. Out of the 600, you're going to park it into a 7-year fixed annuity paying 3.5%. And in 7 years from now, you're going to start to take income or cash flow out of that annuity. You can also set up a fixed index annuity, which is really an excellent tool for growth without jeopardizing your capital, principal, and or earned interest in the accounts. So with the fixed index annuities, you're actually playing at the blackjack table, but instead of having the ability to win, lose, or draw, you only have the ability to win or draw or push, as I call it in Vegas, because you cannot lose. So the worst thing that you can do in a fixed index annuity is to get a 0 rate of return for the year, which means that if the market dropped by 30%, then the worst you can do is stay where you're at in the previous year, because the rate of return would be 0, and you would not be able to suffer any losses in the fixed index annuity accounts. Now, you always have the ability to participate in the upswing of those accounts, so you're going to have the diversification to choose different investment options that you may want to put your money in from that perspective. By the same token, you want to use life insurance and guaranteed annuities to create survivor benefits. And that's very, very important. Now, many times, if you annuitize an annuity contract and you get a life income option only, it's going to pay you the highest amount of money. Now, once you die, that money will probably go away. But you can replace that with a guaranteed life insurance contract, and you can use a little bit of the increase in that income in order to offset that survivor benefit. Now, otherwise, you can pick a joint survivor benefit in which that annuity is going to pay you an income for life, and then upon your death, it will continue to pay an income to your surviving spouse for either his or her life along those lines. So, but there are many different ways. Now, if you're not healthy, then obviously life insurance would be out of the question. But if you're someone who happens to be healthy, then it may be a very, very good idea for you to start considering the creation of some life insurance and guaranteed annuity straddles, which may give you a tremendous leverage from an income and a guaranteed standpoint. Now, you also want to create a strategic balance between your taxable, your tax-deferred, and your tax-free buckets. Now, I use the keyword strategic because you have to have all three buckets. The taxable buckets, as we've talked in the past, is the money that goes in after tax. The money gets taxed every year, and then when you pull the money out, you get taxed again. Now, from a taxable standpoint, the taxable bucket is probably the worst. It is not probably, it is the worst bucket to own. But from a liquidity standpoint, it is the best bucket that you can have in your arsenal. So what I tell a lot of my clients is you need to have money in your taxable bucket, which I call the emergency fund bucket or the opportunities bucket, but you have to have a maximum amount or an optimum amount, not to exceed 3 months or 6 months of expenses, depending on the type of job that you have or the type of business that you may own. Now, the tax-deferred bucket, this is a critical one because the vast majority of the clients that I engage for the first time, all of their retirement assets are mostly in the tax-deferred bucket and some in the taxable bucket. So the challenge with that is that you also need to have an optimum amount in which to have in those buckets, because if you have too much money in your tax-deferred bucket, you're going to pay the price dearly at retirement. Why? Because you're not going to have any type of protection from increase in taxes in the future. So therefore, when taxes increase, then all of those distributions, all of that cash flow coming out of your tax-deferred bucket will be fully taxable. If you have way too much money coming out of that bucket, whether the IRS forces you to or your standard of living may force you to, then now you're going to have a negative impact on your Social Security benefits and the taxation of those benefits, and also the Medicare premiums that you pay in retirement. So you need to have an optimum amount. Now, I'm not saying that you need to throw away the baby with the bathwater, but you need to have the optimum amount in the tax-deferred bucket in order to make certain that you can limit those distributions and by the same token limit the amount of tax liabilities that you may have to deal with in retirement. And then last but not least would be your tax-free bucket. Whatever doesn't go into the taxable bucket or the tax-deferred bucket should go into the tax-free bucket. Now, I'm not including individual securities, or I'm not including real estate. I'm talking about your tax-free bucket, which includes your Roth IRAs, your 401k, your Roth 401ks, your 7702 plans, and your municipal bonds. Now, out of the four, only the Roth 401k, the Roth IRA, and the 7702 plans are totally exempt from any tax liabilities when it comes to your Social Security benefits and your Medicare premiums. Although municipal bonds are received federal income tax-free, then the distribution gets added on to the provisional income calculation to determine what percentage of your retirement assets will be taxed at some point in time in the future. So be careful with your municipal bond funds. Now, 7702 plans are an excellent tool for retirement, especially if you're going to do it from a retirement distribution percentage. You see, the vast majority of Americans, when they purchase life insurance, they try to buy the most amount of death benefit for the least amount of premium. But if you're going to use it strategically in the tax-free bucket as a retirement supplement, as an additional retirement income that will come to you and your family on a tax-preferred basis, then you want to use the most amount of premium or the most amount of contributions for the least amount of death benefit. And what that does, it accelerates the increase of the cash account and the cash values inside of those contracts that will create and may be able to create a substantial retirement distribution fund for you and your family that you fully control, that the IRS will not control at retirement, and the distribution will not be controlled by the IRS, and you can pick and choose when to take the money out, and if you don't take it at all, then your family will get it all tax-free upon your death. So if you have the perfect world, you would want to have monies in your Roth IRAs, your Roth 401ks, and 7702 plans to the maximum level possible from a financial perspective. Now, you also want to use life insurance to cover the risk of living with a disability by purchasing what I call a double coverage protection. Many of the new life insurance policies that you can purchase in the United States today, even if you're using them as a supplemental retirement plan, come with critical illness and chronic illness riders and disability riders that allow you to invade the death benefit in order to cover long-term care issues and concerns in the future, because for those of you that may not know this, Medicare does not cover long-term care. And if you're a 65-year-old couple today, there's a 70% probability that one of you is going to have a need for long-term care in the future, because the longer you live in retirement, the higher the susceptibility for you to have a long-term care issue that you may not be able to deal with. And the cost of long-term care is going through the roof. It's actually increasing at 3 times the rate of inflation in the United States. So it's something that you're going to have to deal with, your family's going to have to deal with, and that is something that you need to pay attention to. Life insurance can help you because you don't have to wait to die in order for your family to collect the benefit. So if you use it as a double coverage protection, if you have a need for long-term care, you can pull money out of that contract in order to meet and mitigate the additional expenses. And upon your death, whatever is left goes to your beneficiaries on a tax-free basis. And if you happen to die in your sleep without ever needing that long-term care coverage, then the death benefit proceeds will again go to your surviving spouse if you're married, or your beneficiaries. At the end of the day, what I like about long-term care inside of life insurance contracts is that someone will always, always, always collect a benefit, and that's a win-win for you and your family as well. Now, what are some of the other things that you can do in order to avoid your retirement plan to get to DEFCON 1? And this is something I've been doing for 30 years because, I've been fairly athletic ever since I was a youngster playing baseball. I joined the Marine Corps when I graduated high school. So I've always stayed in fairly shape. Some years you gain a little bit of weight, some other years you lose it. But it is very important for you to stay healthy. It is extremely important that you work out daily. Now make sure you see your doctor. I want to use that disclaimer before you start any type of weightlifting or workout program. Make sure you get your medical records done for you on an annual basis. So you want to work out daily. You want to lift weights, especially if you're a woman. You want to lift weights on a weekly basis, 3-4 times a week. It's going to help you with your bone density. It's going to help you with flexibility. And for men, it's going to help you maintain your muscle mass, which is going to protect your bones in retirement and for many, many years to come. For many of you, walking is going to be a great exercise. But you also need to walk and make sure that you lift some weights, because you need to maintain that muscle mass that walking alone is not going to do for you, but from an aerobic standpoint is very, very good. Now, one of the things that you may want to check out, and again, make sure you talk to your physician about this, but if you go to YouTube, it has been proven that a structured kettlebell program may be optimum from a fitness standpoint. You can actually do aerobic work and strength conditioning work using Russian kettlebells. And if you go to YouTube and just put kettlebell workout programs, it's going to give you hundreds of different types of programs that you can start using with your family. You can use it at home with as little as 1 or 2 kettlebells, and you can start getting in shape immediately. And then last, I think it's important that you enjoy life. because at the end of the day, tomorrow is promised to no one. One of the questions that I ask the vast majority of the clients that come to see me for the first time is, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? And you'd be surprised the answers I get. I have friends that are 60 years of age, and they look and feel and act as if they were 85 years of age. Why? Because from a mental aptitude, they're already old. They're thinking about collecting on Social Security. They're thinking about, being sick all the time. Some of them, when I talk to them, I try not to call them often, because when I do, I have to go and do something and get a drink, because they're only talking about their diabetes, or they're sick about this, or their high blood pressure, or this and that. That's definitely where you don't want to be when it comes to your retirement life. You need to enjoy it. You need to enjoy the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years of your life, because the no-go years are going to come, and so will the slow-go years. So if you can keep those go-go years for as long as you possibly can, not only from a physical, but also from a mental aptitude, then you're going to be in a much, much better position as you get older. On the other hand, I have a very good friend of mine who's 93 years of age, and he just retired a few months ago. And he used to be a boxer, so he boxed when he was a kid for years. And he's still, running around his lake, walking around the lake, throwing punches, exercises, always calling me, teach me about how to get online. And I teach him how to get online and how to do a happy hour and do a virtual happy hour, especially with what we're going through today. And he's excited about life. He wants to live another 20 years. Mentally, he will more than likely be able to live another 20 years now. Whether he will physically or not, who knows? But those are things that are very, very important. And those are things that only you can control. So you can't control what's going to happen to the market tomorrow. You can't control what's going to happen to taxations in the future. You can't help what's going to happen to your tax rates unless you do proper tax planning, and that's something you should be looking at very closely. You can't figure out and try to be able to identify what's going to happen and when is the market going to drop and what's going to happen to your retirement income. But there are a lot of things that you can control. Cash flow you can control. How you feel about life you can control. How do you stay in shape you can control. How can you avoid becoming a diabetic? How can you avoid getting fat and putting on 30, 40 pounds of weight? And then trying to walk around with all that extra weight that is going to create all kinds of issues, heart issues for you, and issues in long-term care that you want to try to avoid for as much as you can. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that you can do to avoid having your retirement plan at DEFCON 1. But the first thing that you need to do is you need to identify what DEFCON number are you in. Are you at DEFCON 5? Are you at DEFCON 4? Are you at DEFCON 3? Are you at DEFCON 2, similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis, from a military standpoint? Or are you at DEFCON 1, where anything that's going to happen in the future, the probability that you're going to run out of money and your retirement life is not going to be adequate is almost 100%. So always remember, if you want to reach out to me and kind of pick my brain about any of these issues, and I always try to make the titles fun, because the more analogies that I can give you, the better off it is for you and your family, and for the understanding of some of these critical topics that are so important for us to discuss. Again, this is episode 109 of Your Tax-Free Life. Feel free to reach out. My number is 786-766-1042. You can also send me an email at Bert, B-E-R-T, at bertsalazar.com, BERTSALAZAR.com. And always remember that my goal every single week for you and your family is to kind of help you change the way that you do things, because when you change the way that you do things, the things that you do, that you see, and the things that you do change. So once again, have a great day, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.